Hello. So in this video, we're going to talk about a kind of general outline of a lesson plan for a says-does analysis. So this is basically built out of the idea of a says-does outline, which is a particular approach to outlining an essay or reverse outlining an essay in which you figure out what each paragraph is going to say, what its content is, and then what it does. What is its purpose in building this overall argument, or what's its rhetorical objective? Basically, this lesson is a way of having students break down an essay or an article or whatever it is to figure out how it structurally works. Now, this particularly works well with generally pretty regimented types of papers. It's not necessarily as good for something like, say, a literary analysis or a personal narrative, where it's less clear each section of the essay should have a specific objective. You can still do it for those types of projects, but the approach that you take is going to be a little bit different than what I was doing with my classes. So I've taught this lesson in the context of job application letters, which basically have a very standardized format. A job application letter typically has 4 major paragraphs, each of which has a general function. And so what I had my students do was to look at a couple of sample application letters, and I gave them 2 letters for homework from previous students with their names taken off, and divided the class into 2 groups, each group responsible for one of those letters. And basically, they had to create a says-does outline with one additional component, which was effectiveness. So for each of these paragraphs, they had to figure out, they had to list out first, what is the content of this paragraph? What is it actually saying? What information is being given? Then they had to list out what it does. What is its rhetorical purpose? What is it trying to show readers, or what is it trying to convince readers of? Now, this exercise particularly worked pretty well because an application letter generally wants to follow what's called the ADA structure, in which each portion has a distinctive objective. And so one of the metrics that students could use for figuring out what its rhetorical goal was to think about the ADA structure, right? So the first paragraph gets the reader's attention. The second paragraph develops interest in the person applying, etc., etc. And so some of my students very much framed the does portion in terms of that structure. So that's the reason that I say this is very effective and fits really well with projects, essays, articles, whatever it is, where you have distinct sections that have distinct objectives. Now, you can, of course, do that without that, right? Without that kind of framework. A literary essay, you could break it down, or something like that, where it's sort of broader and open to a lot of structural variation, etc., etc. You can still say, here's what this paragraph's rhetorical purpose is. It's a little more analytically challenging when you don't have that sort of distinctive framework, which is not necessarily a good argument for not doing the exercise if you think it's going to be useful. But so that's the sort of second thing that they had to do. And then the third thing that they had to do for each paragraph was to assess its effectiveness. So basically, in the context of the job application letter, for this job call, which I also gave the students, how effectively shaped is this material? How likely is it to convince this reader that the person applying would be a good fit, and why? So that's the basic component. It is analyzing each paragraph within a document for 3 pieces. What is its content? What is its rhetorical objective? And how effectively does it achieve that rhetorical objective, and why? So this is a very sort of quick and efficient way of breaking down an essay and figuring out the structure of it and how that structure functions to achieve an overall rhetorical goal, because you, of course, want to sort of step back from the paragraph level and look at the document as a whole at the end of the day. Once you've got that reverse outline that says, does effectiveness reverse outline, you can then say, okay, taking this as a whole, how well does this entire document work? And again, I think sort of breaking things down into that, in that way, giving students shorter sections, paragraph-long sections rather than whole essays to focus on, really can help to get a more granular level of analysis, because there's less content within a paragraph, and so they can focus in more detail on what it's doing well or what it's doing poorly. And so I think that really helps students to develop a deeper and more sophisticated understanding of how these documents work and why they work the ways they work.